Who dat to you, Saints fans? Welcome back to another victory edition of the game recap here. Now, it's preseason week 2, so honestly, I'll be honest, I don't really care as much about the win as I do what happened during the win, but we'll cover it. We'll talk about Jake Haener and helping him lead this team to victory. We'll talk about the pros, the cons, because there's definitely plenty of negatives in this game, and I absolutely do not come into this podcast talking about this game was amazing. It was definitely not amazing in terms of positivity, but it wasn't bad. There's a lot of good to talk about it, and we will go over all the things in it, as well as get your opinions, because the post-game recaps are made to be great. Get your emotions out, get your thoughts out, and let people know what you think about the game. I want to grab those who are here early. We love to give those who are prompt and on time a little bit of love. Shout out to Lester Shipman, Depreciate, Mr. Long, Amused Batman, Forever Trill, Troy Jefferson, Allen Harris. You're good, buddy. We're going to tell you about the game since you were driving, so we'll give you the full recap. Top of the boat, Slade Smith, Kevin Prokop, Petty Capital. They're from the 504. I can tell by the name. In fact, Petty Capital might be the best name of a bond shop that could ever come out. Don't know what you own, but that's what you should own. Still Bill, Dewan, Little Uzi, Elvis, Jared, James, Dewan, Najee, Shane, Nola Gang. Who dat to everybody coming in through into tonight's episode of the Who Dat Confessional podcast, recapping the Week 2 victory over the Los Angeles Chargers, 22-17. Let's start with what we had earlier in the night. That's what I kind of like to do. Number one, let's highlight some positives. Malcolm Roach, I've really loved what I've seen from him in a rotational capacity. I don't think I'm necessarily ready to go ahead and crown him as the guy that I see as an up-and-comer to make the roster or make big plays, but I will say I enjoy watching him. I think that he's definitely made a legitimate argument to be a consistent rotational piece. And I'll be honest, I think he deserves to be on the 53-man roster based off what we've seen from camp, these 2 games, and last week. Not somebody I see as a starter, and you also got to wonder where are you going to find spots for him. You got Kalen Saunders, can't see him not making the roster. You got Brian Breezy. You've now got Nate Shepard. Do you end up throwing him in as that 4th? I don't know. We'll wait and see. But I still like what I've seen from him. Also, Kalen Saunders, speak of the devil, and he pops up with the most amazing short area quickness you'll see from a man his size. I thought he had some good plays this game. And not to be outdone, Peyton Turner has quietly put together 2 straight pretty good games, even coming in today with a sack and forced fumble. Now, in game 2, you are going against all the backups. You know, the number 2s, number 3s are fighting, and then you get to the second half, a lot of the bottom end of the roster for these teams. But still, getting to see him have some level of success is something that we've waited for some time. And in the second half, we'll talk about Lelos, who ends the game with 3 sacks. Is it enough for him to make this roster? I'm not ready to commit to it yet, but if he's not on your radar, well, you're kind of missing out. Also, best throw of the game, hands down, in my opinion, Jameis Winston to Kendra Miller, second quarter, wheel route up the left side, absolutely beautiful. And while you don't get to see a lot of quality runs from the New Orleans Saints this entire day, it was a real tough slog for that backup offensive line. This was a play that really made you go, well, that's the Kendra Miller that we drafted, and that's what you hope to see. Here were the stats at the end of the first half. Don't worry, commenters. I'll get to y'all in just a second. End of the first half, Kendra Miller had 10 carries for 23 yards. That's a 2.3 average. Long of 9. He did have 1 touchdown. Jameis Winston in the first half went 13 of 20 for a $169, long of 42. Did get sacked twice, and he has definitely been holding onto the ball a little bit long, but overall wasn't bad. Top receivers were Shaq Davis in the first half. He had 1 big one for 42. That was from Winston. Had Bowden had a couple good catches. Miller with that big one up the left side. And Lucas Kroll made an appearance both in a positive and a negative way. Lucas Kroll had some really good catches, but also some should have been tutties. A.T. Perry much quieter today, which I actually anticipated. Only had 2 receptions in the first half. Defensively, though, Malcolm Roach led the team in tackling in the first half. I thought he had some really good plays. Nephew Sewell would have been number 2. Amadi, who I know Nick Underhill believes is going to make this roster. Peyton Turner with your lone sack of the first half. And then you had a couple of pass breakups by Smith. You had one by Passignon. Great play. We know he's probably going to make the roster as that backup defensive end behind Cameron Jordan. Yadam also had a nice PBU, as well as Zach Baum made an appearance. And then another one from Breezy. Yes, the rookie defensive tackle coming in with some nice ones. So that was kind of like your first half recap. And overall, it was a good game. I mean, was it crazy? No. But I will say that a win is a win, and you look solid. My biggest concerns watching in that first half, two big things, and I'll put them in the background. You had this in the entire game, but halfway through the second quarter, the New Orleans Saints had 7 penalties. You had multiple penalties by the offensive line, holdings, false starts. These are really worrisome for me. And one of the reasons that I leave this game not really confident is that we looked at this team struggle to play fundamentally sound. Lots of yellow hankies on the ground, didn't like that. And in terms of third down efficiency, the Saints were 2 for 8 on third down in the first half. And I think a lot of these problems stem in the offensive line. Now, to give y'all an idea of who was who and where was where, you had guys like Trevor Penning, who did start today. And Trevor Penning did not have the same level of dominance in this game that he did in last week's game. But I don't necessarily think he had a terrible game. To be very clear, I'm not trying to down Trevor Penning, simply saying that he did not look amazing. And that there were a couple plays where he certainly had a little bit of the old whoopsie whoops because he got juked out on a couple plays. In fact, one highlight for the Chargers comes from a TFL. That is because Trevor Penning got caught with his guns kind of sticking in the holsters, kept his hands low, wasn't able to get that quick punch out and jab, take that half-man relationship, and ends up losing that one. But again, I don't necessarily think this is spelling, Penning had a bad game, simply not the level of dominance that we saw from last week. Your starters for the New Orleans Saints offense was left tackle Trevor Penning, left guard Nick Saldiveri. I've been telling people to watch that one. I really want to go back and watch Saldiveri's tape. A.T. Perry on the outside, and with Bowden right next to him on the other side. Throckmorton at right guard, Garcia at center, and Norton at right tackle, who ended up having, I think, 3 penalties on him in the first half. We'll go back and recount that. And, of course, Winston got the start. Defensively was Peyton Turner, passing on at the ends, Saunders and Breezy up in the middle. Then you had Smith, Sewell at linebacker, Howden, Adebo, Taylor, Roby, and then finally, last but not least, Jonathan Abrams at safety. So those were your starters. I'm going to grab a couple of comments from my chat. Good to see y'all. Mr. Don says, Jameis just holds the ball too long, regardless of the line. It's more him than it is the line. The thing with Jameis, and this has always been his case, I'm not turning this into a Jameis Flame episode. This is simply Jameis going all the way back to FSU and to now. Jameis wants the big play. He wants to see the top end of the routes develop. He wants to give them time. If there is a concept that has a 12-yard or 17-yard break, he is going to try to make sure that is open. I'm not saying right or wrong. I would say in a West Coast offense, you tend to go for the more quicker, short to intermediate. If you have a triangle read, you're going to take a look pre-snap. If that safety looks like your read is off, you're just going to go, not worry about it. That's not the style that Winston is. I'm not saying he doesn't fit in a West Coast offense because he does. He simply wants to have the big play. He is a traditional gunslinger. That's what Winston is. It's good. It's bad. It has pros. It has cons. Jameis Winston is definitely a West Coast quarterback. He was scouted as a West Coast guy coming into the league. He is now. He simply is a gunslinger. And everybody's used to Sean Payton and Drew Brees making a gunslinger look quick. That was just the fact that you had Drew Brees. Truth is, if you have this type of gunslinger in the West Coast, it just happens when you don't have a Hall of Fame level guy. And that's okay, but that also means you end up having him result in 2 sacks. Either way, though, you watch this game, I think you have to really like what you see from Winston as a whole. And I said this last week, in terms of backup quarterbacks, New Orleans is in a position that arguably nobody in the league is. I like it. If he was the full-time starter, we could talk about his pros and cons. I don't think that he's absolutely terrible. I really don't. But I do think that in terms of if something is to happen to Carr, New Orleans is in a good position. You definitely saw in today's game that you can move the football with Jameis Winston. You can score with Jameis Winston. Now, some of those scores might not go your way, and some penalties might negate some progress, but you can certainly move and score if you have to, and he's a good backup if that's what you're going to do. Hunter says, Haener looked better to me than Winston did, and I'm going to 100% disagree. I know that there is a love affair for Jake Haener, but one, his mechanics are bad. It's just he's got to work on those mechanics. And two, I think that Haener makes a lot of hero ball type throws that we get on to Winston for, but we give Haener credit for. I think the difference is Haener is a rookie coming in that you know has time to develop, whereas Winston is he is what you see. He's not changing, right? Like you look at Haener, you see potential, hope that you can work out those problems. But at the same time, it is what it is. Let's get into some of the second half. We'll get into some more of the comments. You know, obviously Haener is the hopeful future. You see if you develop him. But if you're talking about building a great team this year, you love the idea of Carr starting, Winston back up, and then Haener down the road if you need him. I love that idea. I think that's absolutely fantastic to have those there. And it is what it is. So King Arthur says, Rev, what was happening with Brian Edwards with the OPI penalties? I was only able to see the play-by-play. I'll be honest, Edwards just had a really bad game. To the point that I actually tweeted that how things are going right now, it's hard for me to envision Edwards making this team. It really is. Now, that's a combination of several things. That's a combination of one, I think A.T. Perry, end of the day, decent. I told y'all after the first game, don't jump on the A.T. Perry dominating the world bandwagon just yet. That doesn't mean it's bad. I don't think A.T. Perry is bad. I just think that he had a fantastic game week one and that you're going to see him come down to earth. Today was a comeback down to earth, but I don't think he's bad, and I think he makes the team over Edwards. And then you also look at guys who did have some good pop-up moments like Shaq Davis. What do you end up doing with Davis? Some really big catches from him, and obviously he's one of those big-body guys that you just love what he provides in terms of frame. What I will be interested to see is when we get to tomorrow, y'all, I will share on both Discord, Facebook, and Twitter these snap counts. Who was playing special teams in these roles? And that's when I look at guys like Kirkland and Davis and Bowden. How are they going to make the roster? How are they looking on special teams? That's one of those things I want to see. And I also want to see the snap counts for some of these guys that have come in, like Darrell Williams, who did not have a fantastic day in terms of the box score, but I think a lot of that is the offensive line. And I hate to use the word worried, but I will say that the depth on the offensive line does not give me the excitement that I had hoped to see, though I'm not ready to just dismiss it and say the Saints are screwed if any of the starters go down, because I don't think that's the case. But I will say that this offensive line, when it comes to the backups, does not get near the movement and does not look as crisp as other backup units have looked. On the opposite side, coming in, I was really worried about the defensive line depth. I talked really in depth about my worry from the edge and the pass rush perspective. And this is a game where the pass rushes, a defensive line and a front seven stepped it up. So as we get closer to the regular season, this is why you like having multiple games, like having all these joint practices, so that you can get more evaluation, because a single week is not going to simply earn it for you. Now, Elvis says that Davis earned his way on the practice squad, and here's the tricky thing for me, Elvis. If I had to pick 5 wide receivers who make this roster as of today, Davis isn't on mine. Davis is not on my 53. But again, I think that there's no wrong answer here, and I think this is a good problem to have from the wide receiver unit that we did not expect to have. I personally think it's a good problem, and I didn't expect to have it. We know our top 3 wide receivers are basically locked in, right? You know, it's Olave, it's Sheed, it's Thomas. But after that, I think that A.T. Perry is a lock, almost a lock. I think he deserves a spot in that 5th one. I understand just about any name you want to throw in. There's people definitely making a name for themselves. We'll see how it goes. Real quick to Priest, thank you for supporting the channel. Greatly appreciate that. When I see Haener play, I can't help but get excited for the future. He does so much right. I think his big weakness is his deep ball accuracy. I have so much more hope for him than I did for Ian Book. I definitely get what you're saying on that last point. I would say that when I see him make some of these plays, you know, you'll see him. One of the things that I critique on him a little bit, maybe I do it too much, is his arm angle when he releases his throws. I don't feel like he has a compact enough angle, and I feel like you see that limit his ability to throw with touch. I think one of the things that I want to see him get better at is when it comes to whether it's offhand mechanics in terms of moving off and having to go off script and use upper body mechanics while on the move, or it's actually setting his base and getting his, plant foot forward, going at the receiver. I want to see his mechanics improve to the point where you see the ability to throw more touch on passes, to throw into tighter windows. And right now, you see a lot of upper body mechanics with him, which is why some of his short passes go high. I'm not sure how many people paid attention to some of his short passes to the flat, where he'll throw to a running back who's only 5 yards away, but yet the running back's going above his head to catch a ball. Little things like that I want to see him improve on. But this is also why I'm excited about Haener, whereas Jameis Winston's done this his whole career, and it's never gotten better. Haener's a rookie, and he's going to be the number 3 quarterback on this roster. He has time to get better, develop, and have people train him. He doesn't have to go into the fire right now. So the good things from him you love to see. I really do enjoy the processing you see as the wheels are turning in those scramble drills. Does a really good job to find the routes that are open, to buy that extra time. I love some of those plays. So hopefully we see more from that. we'll see how he ends up developing, but he's exciting to watch, and we might have to do a film study for him. He says, Deuce, that hit that Jalen Smith put on Old Dude was nasty. Is he normally a coverage linebacker? I would not say that Jalen Smith is known for being a coverage linebacker, just to throw that out there. Does that mean that he can't do it? Obviously not. In fact, he actually recorded one of your pass breakups today. But he'll be one that we should probably take a look at when we hopefully get the All-22 tomorrow morning, or the All-22 might drop a little late. So for those looking for a film study tomorrow, can't promise you I can drop one tomorrow. Really depends on when the All-22 gets released, and then I can try to jump in and do that. But we'll see. We'll see. So joint practice with the Texans has been canceled. This is correct. I'm not too concerned about it, but I do love the joint practice for what you can actually see from it. Real quick, I do want to finish up some of these team stats. If you look, the New Orleans only ended up with 13 first downs as a team. That's a problem. The good news is the defense forced 3 turnovers. The defense looked actually pretty good. Looked pretty good. So happy about that, but offense only 13 first downs. Finished the game 5 for 17, which is a 29% efficiency on third down. That's definitely not good at all. 14 penalties for 141 yards. That's a huge negative. You can't have more penalties than you do first downs. That's not winning football. But you do love the turnover rate. You love that both kickers, good games. Shout out to both of the kickers. Had a 5 for 5 on field goals. So had Groupie hit both of his, and he got an extra point, and Will Lutz hit all 3 of his. From a punting perspective, I think Blake Gillikin's definitely the best of the 2 punters. To me, that's not really any part of a debate at the moment, but you do have Headley, who got 5 punts in today. So if you like kicking, this was a great day to watch Saints football. And in terms of return, we definitely have not seen anybody pop off too much yet this year as being like an elite returner like we did when we had Deontay Hardy, pop off in the beginning. So hopefully we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we'll see how that goes. And we'll just kind of move from there. Trey says, the Saints allowed him 4th and 23 on a duck ball. You are absolutely right, Tracy. You want to know the good positive news on that? That was the 5th team. That was the Rev Deuce and the Matt Slays and the Muse Batman out on there in coverage. No offense to those players, because they can do better than I can. I'm just pointing out that you're not going to see any of those players on a 53-man roster unless really bad things happen. Really bad things happen. I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm just being honest. When you get to the 4th quarter of a game, some of the names that you're going to see, those are the only times you're going to see those names. And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. We'll work with that, right? We're not going to fret. We'll let that go. So we'll just kind of see. King says, did Kendra Miller look to be favoring his knee at all? Chad said he didn't run through the tackles well. I think the run through the tackles has nothing to do with Kendra Miller's knee. I think it has to do with Kendra Miller's vision. Same thing that we talked about in week 1. Kendra Miller is not Alvin Kamara day 1. That's okay. I don't think he has to beat Alvin Kamara day 1. But there was a lot of hype that got built up after the draft, and I get the hype because there are similarities. But there was a lot of hype that was basically like, yo, Kendra Miller is just young AK, and you're going to roll with it. I think you can see in these first 2 preseason games, not that Kendra Miller is a bad running back. I don't think that's at all. I just think that he's going to need to get better. He is simply not AK, and that is okay. But his ball carrier vision and his short area agility is not on Alvin Kamara's level yet. And for a team that is a predominant inside and outside zone running scheme, he's going to have to get that going. He's going to have to get that going. The way that you do that is reps, opportunities, and that's what they're doing today. There's a reason he had 10 carries today, and there's a reason that he's been used a lot in the practice. But the truth is, when you get into the season, the plan is to have Jamal Williams and to have Alvin Kamara be your primary guys anyway, and that's okay. So, again, we're talking about a guy that's being given an opportunity to develop, but I do think is going to contribute, and you're going to notice that he's probably going to have one of those pop-off games in the regular season. Kendra Miller's going to hit that stride. It's going to happen for him, and we'll see how it goes from there. Dre Day says, will passing on Spears backfire? I love Tajay Spears. I said I wanted the Saints to draft Tajay Spears. Here's the thing. The truth is, Tajay Spears is one of those literal ticking time bombs. What I mean by that, and I'm not trying to speak negatively over the man, but he has severe knee issues. Now, Tajay Spears can maybe go 3 or 4 years in the NFL and do amazing and it hits him. He could go 1 year in the NFL, be amazing, and it hits him. He could somehow go 8 years in the NFL, and it hits him. But it is almost impossible to believe that he is going to have a long NFL career like an Alvin Kamara. Can it happen? Absolutely, and I want it to. But if I'm just being honest, I would have rather drafted Kendra Miller than Tyjae Spears as well, even though I love Tyjae Spears. If you're just being from a general manager, you're looking at how long can I realistically get this player? And Kendra Miller, hopefully, if he's healthy, is a 2-contract type of a running back, maybe 3. Tyjae Spears is what most people consider a 1-contract running back. And you see what happens after that. There's a lot of risk in Spears, but there's a lot of boom potential, right? And if you watched that game that he did this weekend, he had one highlight play that everybody's going crazy about. And if you watched him at Tulane, that's not a shock. The shock will be, does he have an 8-year, 10-year NFL career? And I really hope that he does, because I want nothing but the best for him. Want nothing but the best. King says, did Debo and Taylor look good? Can't really give you an opinion on how DBs look until we get the All-22, so hopefully we can start taking a look at that tomorrow. I do need to know, y'all can let me know in the Discord, y'all can let me know on Twitter, what are the players you want me to focus on in this one? I think I personally want to do some Peyton Turner. I do think we need to take a look at the offensive line again, and I'll say this, man, Trevor Penning just looks real different when James Hurst is not next to him, and I don't think that's because Hurst is amazing. I just think that's because this offensive line, woo, them number twos is number twos. Now, I still am excited about Sadaveri, but I knew that he was going to need to develop. I knew that was going to need to happen. So we'll see how that goes. Jimbo says, even if he's the next Todd Gurley, I still wish we would have drafted him, and he has looked great on the NFL field. My only counter to that, Jimbo, is he hasn't looked great on the NFL field because we haven't even had regular season games yet. I'm not trying to dip Spears, but I'll give you the same thing I'm going to give you about all these Saints players. Just like I did an A.T. Perry film study, like, look, is he him? Here's some things you got to watch for. Great game. And I specifically said, do not get overhyped about A.T. Perry game 1. Skill position players are the easiest players that can pop off in a preseason game. I still think that A.T. Perry is going to be a really good player, but I definitely didn't think that he's ready to be a starter this year. And in this game, you saw he took a little bit of a step back. 3 catches on 5 targets, none of the big crazy. But he's not bad in any stretch. So you let all these games happen, and then you take that as a whole and kind of review it. And you go where you can from there. So you go where you can from there. Nico Lelos had 3 sacks. He did, Don. I would argue that Nico Lelo had sacks against Rev Deuce and TJ and Dr. Bilioshi. But I do think that you can't ignore 3 sacks. You can't ignore 4 tackles for losses. You've got to pay some attention to that, right? It's not something that you can just say, look, it's nothing but backups. It doesn't matter. In fact, we might need to have like an underrated player film study on Lelos at the end of the week. Now, for those that don't know much about Nico Lelos, he is not a new player. Like, he's not just some rookie out of nowhere. He's actually played in the NFL and actually recorded an interception with the Giants in 2020. Yeah, 2020. And that kind of tells you where he's been. Because if you actually go through his transaction history, he's been on, off. He was with the Saints last year on the practice squad. And then you go back into 2020 and 2021, he was with the Giants. So he's not a new player. This is a guy that has some veteran savvy and understands the league. He's only 26 years old, but he's also not just like this undrafted rookie out of college who's never had NFL reps. He managed to have some good reps, but he's a guy who's actually played in the NFL. So we'll see where that takes him. And that's one of the reasons I'm sitting here like, well, I'm not going to like crown him, but at the same time, you can't ignore it either, right? Pragmatic approaches. Danny says you got to do content for fantasy. Danny, my question be why? Why do I got to do content for fantasy? I love film study as it applies to the game, but I don't play the other game, which is fantasy football. There's nothing wrong with it. Why should I get fantasy crazy? Elvis says Foskey makes me want that second rounder back. Again, Elvis, 2 preseason games. Don't do that to yourself, man. 2 preseason games. Let's see. And I would say that he did better this game than he did last game. I think he has the same issue that Kendra Miller does. The game needs to slow down for him, and he needs to get back to what he does well. Because what I saw last week, I was actually talking to a coach about this. What I saw from him last week was a lot of run into a guy just trying to play like he's lost. So he's just trying to go full power and outman somebody. You're not going to outman somebody in the NFL unless you're, Garrett, even a healthy Davenport. Not a lot of people can just outman an offensive lineman. I think the game has to slow down for him, and he has to get back to what actually made him an effective pass rusher in college, which was being a technique fiend. And you are not seeing the technique fiend yet. You're seeing a lot of a guy who is not there yet, and I think that's just coming down to time on the field, letting himself adapt to the fact that he's playing against Ohio State every game now. And if you remember, the worst game he had on his tape last year, if you studied his tape, was Ohio State. He has to adjust to the NFL caliber player and the NFL speed. If he does that, it's going to look good. Right now, the defensive end that's looked the best in terms of the backup or the new guy trying to make a spot, Peyton Turner. Peyton Turner had a solid showing week 1. This week, he stepped it up and looked even better. His inside stunts were really nice. But more importantly for me is Turner had some really nice rushes on the outside, converting speed to power and trying to do 2-arm bull rushes. That was a nice thing to see. So hopefully he can grow as well. And we'll just continue to hope that that pass rush comes along by the time we get to the beginning of the season. So let me grab some more chats. Love to see y'all come through. Les says the coaches need to line up every young O-lineman with Cam Jordan and let him beat them like a drum in practice reps until they start learning how to counter. It's not that easy, but I definitely get what you're saying, Lester. And I do hope that we see improvement from that depth of that offensive line. I really do. I really, truly do. Matt says, good part is a lot of players that we expect to see decent playing time did pretty good, like Tano Passignon, Miller, Breezy, etc. I agree. Now, Tano is one of those that, like, if y'all remember, about 3 years ago, I told y'all I was really excited about Tano Passignon coming to New Orleans from Kansas City. I didn't necessarily expect him to be a starter, but I thought he'd be a quality depth piece. And I think you can see in this game why I felt that way. He's also young. I think that he's probably going to be a rotational guy. He's a Super Bowl champion, but he's 29. He's not super old. I still think he has a good 2 or 3 years left in the league. And he averages, over the past 4 years, he averages 3 sacks a season as a rotational lineman. I think that's good quality play. I like that from a guy. He's also one that I already know what I'm looking at, though. He's had 6 years in the NFL. When I look at Tano against the Chargers tonight, I see exactly what I expect Tano to see. The only drawback to that is I don't expect Tano to ever take a leap and get better. He is what he is. So when I, as an evaluator, when I approach these games, there's some guys that I'm not going to spend a lot of extra time in, because some guys, you reach year 3, year 4, once you're at that point, it's extremely unlikely a guy is going to show you something you haven't seen before. Now, every now and then, there's a shocker and a special. Caden Ellis is a good example of that. Every now and then, a guy comes around who hits that late development and does manage to be some superstar or just a quality player that didn't have that early on. Caden Ellis had that in his 4th year. Popped up, boom. And technically, that's in that year range I'm giving you. But once you get past that 3 to 4 years, you're not going to necessarily see, or it's very unlikely to see, the big pop-up. So you see these veterans that are on the field now, and Tano's going to be what Tano is, a very good rotational guy. And you go on from there. Danny, thank you so much. This is your first time ever super chat and supporting the channel. Thank you so much for your support. I do want to remind everybody, if you want to hang out and get more of your takes, you can follow me on Twitter, you can follow us on Facebook, and you can join our Discord as well as the channel here. The goal is to have 3 film studies a week, as well as our Who Dat Confessional podcast here, to answer as much as y'all want me to answer. That's the goal. Let me get some more of y'all's questions before we wrap up our recap. For those curious when the next episode of Who Dat Confessional will be, for you newer ladies and gents, Tuesdays and Thursdays around 7:30 Central Time is when we do it live. And of course, you can catch it on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, etc., etc. Who Dat says DeMario, Pete, and Jalen should be our first 3 linebackers. So Who Dat, I love just the fervency of your answer. Not ready to give Jalen Smith that spot yet, but I am excited to see how he looked in film today. We'll see. Always, 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 if you want to get into evaluation, I talk to a lot of people who want to get into scouting, because I'll be honest, I think scouting is fun. I think evaluating linemen and linebackers and whatever position group ends up being your favorite, I love that charting. I think it's a great experience. It makes you a better fan and analyst. But you got to remember, it takes time. You can't just say, hey, Jalen Smith, get the spot, because I'll be real. I think that Nephi Sewell, 1, has more tenure in New Orleans, and 2, has some really good reps. And it's not just Nephi, by the way. Remember, Nephi's in his 2nd year with New Orleans. He's only 24, whereas Jalen Smith is an older veteran. Granted, Jalen physically great player, though has had injury history. Jalen Smith is pushing 29, 28, and has been with multiple teams, but he's a former Pro Bowler. Maybe he could be comeback player of the year. Who knows? So I want to see these guys. I thought Connolly has had some really good showings and good reps. It all depends on how it looks. And I really want DeMarco Jackson to pop off. So we wait, we see. Love it. I love it. Dr. Billy Oshie, good to see you, man. Thank you for dropping the Discord link. Remember, everybody is welcome in the Discord, even Falcons fans. We even let them in, and Bears fans and Bucks fans, whatever fans you want to be. Everybody's allowed to join. Just behave yourself. That's all I got to say. Just behave yourself. All right. Let's grab some more of the questions. Appreciate all of y'all. I think y'all are great. All right, let's see. How is Jonathan Abram doing? Again, I can't really answer from today's game simply because I don't have broadcast is the worst way to watch a football game. And I hate that they do it. I understand why. Fans, for the most part, want to see the football, which means you're not going to be able to see the route trees. You're not going to be able to see the coverages in their depth. So that is what it is. So hopefully I can better answer the question about how the safeties look tomorrow, but I won't be able to really do that honestly until then. Now, Abrams did have some snaps last week. He played about 20 snaps, if I remember right, and he looked solid. I mean, nothing particularly special, but hey, looked like a solid player last week. We'll see. TJ says, I'm sorry I haven't seen anything from Neffy to suggest him as a rotational player or linebacker 3. Yeah. Well, I'm not suggesting he's a linebacker 3. I'm simply talking about him potentially making the roster, but we need to watch more tape on him. So, how quickly do you cut Kroll? Oh, amuse Batman. I mean, I'm not saying you don't, because I know I really hate it, because Kroll is one of my dear friend Ross Jackson's favorite names. But I don't necessarily know if you need to cut Kroll, but I'll tell you this. Ain't no way he's fighting for those top 3 tight ends snaps right now. No way. Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson, and Foster Moreau do not have anybody behind them right now that's breathing on their necks. I thought Kroll had some really good plays tonight, but he also had some really bad plays. Yeah, and I didn't even include Jimmy Graham because we need to see what happens with him with the seizures that he had. And obviously prayers and thoughts up for Jimmy Graham for all that. And we'll see how that actually transpires. But I'll be honest, I don't think Lucas Kroll makes a roster. I think he's a practice squad candidate. I think that's okay. And you go on from there. Dupree says Kroll's on the bubble for sure. We have so many tight ends that we need to cut him. We need those roster spots. Yep. Absolutely. So, and I'm not trying to be a hater. This is obviously a really tough time of the year. You know, we're talking about people's livelihoods, so I don't want to just frivolously talk about just getting rid of a player. But Lucas Kroll has been in the league a couple years now. You know, he's with us last year on the squad. He's with us now. If he's going to develop, you let him get that shot. But at the same time, nothing's promised. Everything is earned. And we'll just go with that. Yeah, let's go with that. So he turns, by the way, for those curious, he just turned 25 this year. So he's not exactly an aging veteran. He's got time still. Let's see what other comments we got. I'd love to answer y'all's comments before we wrap. Matt says, cut him. He's going to another team. While I wouldn't like that, I also wouldn't be hurt by it because I think that this year's Saints tight end room is as deep as it's been in years. You have 4 guys who I would not exchange for anybody else that's low on that depth chart. Not Jesse James, not Lucas Kroll, not J.P. Holtz. I would rather have Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill, and Jimmy Graham than any of them, and there's a big gap after Graham anyway. Assuming Graham is healthy, and again, prayers up and positive vibes his way. Don't want anything negative happening to Graham for sure. So we'll just let those guys go how they go. I'm far more concerned about the offensive line depth. Far more concerned about the O-line depth and seeing what happens with that. Bam says we have a lot of wide receivers to trade for O-line depth. And see, that's something I don't necessarily agree with. I know even just this week, we had people talk about, well, somebody will trade something for Traquan Smith. No, they won't. Maybe you can convince Sean Payton to do it. You got to call up Sean like, hey, you want Traquan? You better give me a 4th for him. I know you love him. I don't see anybody trading. I'm not trying to be negative, man. I hate that negativity stuff, but I don't think anybody's trading for the Saints wide receivers. And KL wants an update on Jimmy Graham. So here's what happened with Jimmy. He was arrested and then taken to a hospital. He was apparently lingering in the street, as in just kind of wandering aimlessly. He was a bit lost. He was dazed. He was confused. Ended up getting examined by medical personnel, and they believe he was having they call it a medical event, but looks like reported as seizures. Was taken to the hospital and apparently is okay now. So it's kind of one of those we keep an eye out on him. Preach says, speaking of DeMarco Jackson, what have you seen from him you like so far? He looks invisible out there to me. I think the thing I like with DeMarco is run fits. And at our core, and at any team's core, you obviously want to have a pass defense focus, but as you saw last year, this team still has to be able to do the fundamental task of stopping the run and do that well. I think DeMarco shows a really nice athletic profile. I'm not sure how much y'all have looked at him, but I like him. I think he's a good potential player. Is he insane? No. To give you an idea, though, just to give you some numbers, his relative athletic score was an 8.2. That is an elite RAS. This is a guy that is a developmental linebacker. His size is a smidge low from what you're used to New Orleans taking because he's right over 6 foot. He's about 235, 240 on a good day. But looking at things like his broad jump, his 40-yard dash, his 10-yard split, more importantly, elite numbers. In fact, his 10-yard split, like his ability to stop and move, that click and close speed we talk about, was 1.46. In terms of like a 10-yard split, that's nuts, y'all. That is insanely good in terms of the ability to get from 0 to 10 in an instant. So you see him have really good run fits, and he has the athletic ability to be more. He has the athletic ability to be a good coverage guy, but he was always going to need development. That got slowed last year because of injury, and you're just giving him an opportunity to do that now. He's a solid tackler. He recognizes plays. He diagnoses quickly and gets there, but he still needs things to get him better. So stack and shed needs to get better. The ability to drop in the hole and read a coverage and understand route concepts and what's going to enter into your zone and what's not. Those things all need to improve. But I like a lot of what I see from him and hope that he develops into what I hope he can be. Right? No guarantees, but that's what I'm hoping for. That he can develop into that. Muse Batman says, since Granderson didn't play tonight, do you think he's about locked in opposite Cam? I wouldn't use the word locked in because I think that New Orleans opposite Cam is going to do a lot of rotation. But I will say that Granderson is probably the number one guy at the moment. But Turner's right on his heels. I think Turner's right on his heels. So I would say he's on his heels. I think Turner's doing enough to show that he shouldn't be forgotten and that he's a first-round pedigree. But Granderson's got a chip on his shoulder, and I've said it a lot, man. Some of these, undrafted and low draft pick guys get a little chip on their shoulder when they get overlooked. I think he's got that because everybody keeps asking about Peyton Turner. Nobody's really asking about how Carl Granderson's doing, and I think that man has got a big chip to want to have that starting position given to him because he's been working at it. For those that don't remember, Carl Granderson's been with his team 4 years. This is not a young buck out of nowhere. Granderson's 26, but he's been with the team for it. Like, he's put in the work. And over the past 3 years, he's averaging 4.5 sacks a season as a rotational player, and he's only 26. So I like what he's trying to do. He will turn 27, I think, in December, so at the end of the season. But man's trying to get his snaps in. He's trying to earn those. So, yeah, we'll see how it ends up playing out. Let's see what other comments we got before we get to our wrap-up time. Rudy says, Peyton Turner has some really good reps along with rookie Brian Breezy. I definitely agree, Rudy. Like that you saw it as well. Lacey, good to see you. Who dat, man? Turner's a first-round pick. Needs to step up this year. I never try to blame a player for what they were picked at because they have no control over that. My scouting report on Marcus Davenport had a third-round grade, as did a lot of people. My scouting report on Turner had a late second/third. My report on Foskey had a second/third. So all these guys had to be developed, but they also had fit a prototype that Dennis Allen really likes. And you can argue, reached a little bit so that they could get their prototype. If that's the right or the wrong thing, I'm not going to argue that. But what I will say is I'm not going to blame Turner for that. Because we saw what happened to Davenport. Fans did blame Davenport for that. And I'll admit that there were times I dogpiled on that. And that was a little unfair. Now, should have Davenport have done better? Absolutely. But when you hear Davenport talking in the offseason, like in Minnesota, how last year he had just like lost all confidence and everything, I know a lot of the talking has something to do with that. And I'm not a fan of saying, well, they're professionals, they should ignore the talking. If somebody's talking to you that you're trash at your job for 3 straight years, you're going to start feeling you're trash at your job and want a new job. So hoping for a success. It is what it is. We'll hopefully see Turner in his 3rd year pop off. I said that you needed to let Ruiz have his 3rd year. Ruiz had his best season ever, and Ruiz was arguably the best offensive lineman New Orleans had last year in his 3rd year. Hopefully Turner has the same thing. Hopefully. KLD says, all in all, nobody in the division can mess with us. If we don't win the division, I'll be disappointed. I won't agree with that one, because as much as I love the Saints and I do try to talk about what they can do well, I'm also not going to crown them until they win it. And I'll tell you right now that this team is not significantly better than the rest of the division. But I do think they're better. We'll see. Arnold says DA was yelling at Foskey. I think it was for blowing up a QB run touchdown from Stick. There's a couple of those sideline moments. I'm curious to see if I'll be able to see those in the All-22. But yes. Yes, they will. And Daniel says SoFi Stadium is kind of booty. The roof from inside is ugly. Daniel, I don't know if you saw, but it was also leaking really bad tonight, too. It was leaking really bad tonight as well. If y'all haven't already, please join the Discord. We're about to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Y'all are amazing. Look, best nation in all sports right here, Who Dat Nation. See you Tuesday. Try to get out film study tomorrow, depending on when the film drops. Who Dat, God bless. Love every single one of y'all. Thank you for coming to the channel. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for everything. We'll see you in the next one. Who Dat, God bless. Deuces, that's me. And we're outie.